Welcome to the 99 podcast with HVS. My co-host today is Josh Barnett, one of the owners of 99, a retro college apparel company. I'm Aaron Meyer. On today's episode, we're going to talk through our thoughts on Jump Shot, the documentary film about Kenny Sailors, and recent winner of the Heartland International Film Festival Audience Choice Award. But first, Billy Packer knows what time it is.
Nice move by Steve Fisher here. Bring it into the 19-9 game. Jim, isn't it amazing when Michigan can keep this game to a 19-foot 9-inch game inside that three-point line? It's all there.
What's going on, Josh?
What's up, sir?
Not much, man. Just making it through a Monday.
I hear you. So I always told you that if you got to hang out with me a little bit, we get to do some cool stuff at some point. Actually, I've never said that to you, and don't believe that whatsoever. However, we did get to do something cool last week when you and I and EJ and our graphic designer Matt Brivogel got to go up to Indy and see a pretty special film. You want to talk to the audience about it a little bit?
Yeah, if you had said that, you would have been right, because it was fun, like a random way to spend a Thursday. We headed up to the Heartland Film Festival, International Film Festival, to see a documentary feature called Jump Shot. It's about a guy who they propose throughout the movie that invented the jump shot. His name is Kenny Sailors, and it does a good job of telling the story. The writer and director is Jacob Hamilton, and you actually got connected through someone else. How'd that come about?
Yeah, so I got an email from our friend at Slam PRC, Peter Robert Casey, and he hooked me up with one of the producers of the film, Ty Clark. And that's kind of how we got connected. I think Ty shot him an email asking if he had any of his people in the area that would want to come and check out the film. And PRC kind of knew that we were in and around Indy. And so I was able to connect with Ty, and he was nice enough to give us 4 passes. And so we busted our ass from Evansville after school, got out to Indy. We almost missed it because you were driving like Miss Daisy.
And then I almost killed us about a mile from the theater.
But anyways, Ty was nice enough to hook us up with 4 passes, so we got to take the 4 guys I mentioned, me and you, and then a couple of the other guys that help us out, Matt with the graphics, and then EJ with the packing and stuff. So I had a great time. I thought the car ride up and the car ride back was worth it alone. Just being able to hang out and talk and laugh and make fun of each other. But the movie itself, and then connecting with Ty and Jacob afterwards, was like truly a blessing. It's just it's cool. Like 99's whole thing is just to kind of connect with people within the basketball culture. Yeah. And we've been very, very fortunate to be able to do that a lot lately. And this was just another one of those times where it was, somebody that I'd never met. And just through the love of basketball and shared interest in basketball, you get to connect. And, we've traded emails since, and we'll keep in touch and all that stuff. And that's really just kind of the beauty of 99 and the beauty of basketball culture. 99 to me has opened me up to connect with other people in the basketball culture. I didn't mean to say that's the beauty of 99 because it was responsible for it, but you know what I'm saying. And we got to connect with other people that share a passion, and it was awesome. And then the movie itself was great, and we're going to get into the movie here during the pod. So just a quick shout out to PRC for connecting us with Ty, and for Ty waiting outside for your driving, slow driving ass up there, and hook us up with the tickets. And then also, just before we get into the film too, just the people of Franklin, because it was in Franklin, Indiana. Turned out for it. That was cool, and the theater was cool, and the way that they set it up and did it with the pledge and the Tom and Jerry cartoons, and the whole setup in there was just like
the popcorn,
laughing in there. But it was cool, man. It was fun. It almost like kind of took you back,
Yeah, it did. You said something about the story, and I think, just a quick summary off the top would be that whether it's talking to you or talking to those guys, you can tell that they love something because the story doesn't stop. As soon as the film was over, they're still talking about the film. If I'm talking to you about 1999 related things or the teams that you guys have licensed, there's a story even after the story on the site's done. I think that's what's so fun.
Yeah, you made that point when Ty and I were talking, and he was talking about some of the people that they got in the film, and he was just kind of telling these roundabout ass ways that they were able to get people to agree. And you somewhere in the pause there looked at me and were like, Josh, that sounds like a ton of your licensing story.
Yeah.
And so I mean,
sure.
it's a different genre, but it's the same hustle, and so I think there's a mutual level of respect there for what those guys did, for sure, because it was really cool and they pulled it off. And going into it, you say, okay, here's this movie called The Jump Shot, and it's about this Kenny Sailors guy who I had never heard of. And it's the guy that invented the jump shot, and you kind of think like, oh, okay, but his story was phenomenal. Like, we all left there like, Kenny Sailors is that dude. Like, that guy
Yeah.
is awesome.
He's like, he ended up like Chuck Norris by the end of it.
Yeah, no kidding. So we'll get into it a little bit here, but those guys did a fantastic job. It was cool getting to meet with them and talk with them, and hopefully we can reconnect with those guys down the line too.
Yeah, and they did say too, for people who are wondering about this, you can obviously find previews on YouTube of it. There's like a 10-minute clip of it just kind of introducing it. But they said they're hoping around March to have a little bit wider distribution of it. So I'm sure at that point we'll repost something and kind of give them a shout out as well.
Yeah, definitely at some point it's got to find its way on Netflix or Amazon Prime or maybe even HBO under a documentary or, whatever. One of those streaming services will obviously pick it up and it'll get out to the masses. And once that happens, we'll definitely push it out there some too. So I thought it was that good. So you want to give a little bit of background on just kind of his story, and then we can
one more thing about it while we're at it. I said it was at the Heartland International Film Festival, but I just saw today on Instagram that it won the Audience Choice Award at that. So obviously it wasn't just us that enjoyed it. A lot of the audience, and it was shown over several days. Some of the Pacers players went and saw it when we were there. The Franklin College team was there. So a pretty wide cross-section of people really enjoyed the storytelling in the movie.
I legit thought about stuff in the ballot box too, but it turns out I didn't have to.
We couldn't even figure out how to do the ballots.
No, I was out there like filling it out with a pen, writing a couple sentences and shit, and really all you had to do was like rip out a number or something. I was just trying to put my best foot forward, man.
We don't go to a lot of film festivals.
Yeah. All right. So the people that haven't seen it yet, and the people that are kind of wondering what the hell we're talking about and who this Kenny Sailors guy is, you want to give your quick recap, and then I'll chime in and we'll go from there.
Well, it seems like there's three parts to his story. The first one, they're kind of introducing how he came up with the idea. Talks about his brother who towered over him like 6 inches on him and just was apparently merciless, didn't let him score a point. And so at some point he literally just jumped in the air to shoot. And being that it was, the 30s or 30s, something like that in Nebraska, no one had ever thought of it. And it turned out that no one else in the country had maybe thought of it, or at least had never taken it to the level that he eventually would. And I think that was the part that they took it to next, which I really liked. They talked about his time with the University of Wyoming. And
let's go. Let me stop you there. Let's go back to the creation of the jump shot, because you said it was in Nebraska, but I think it was in Wyoming, right? Or did they grow up in Nebraska?
He grew up in Nebraska and then moved to Wyoming later. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So I know a big theme of that and a big sense of pride for Kenny throughout the movie was being a Wyoming boy. They reference that several times as we'll get into the Wyoming thing. But you have to understand to start off like how humble Kenny is, or how humble Kenny was during the film. He was just like, I I don't know. They say I invented it, but I mean, who the hell is to say somebody back in the 1800s didn't throw a ball at a hoop while they jumped in the air, like, and he was just
Right.
so like indifferent about it, and so just, I mean, he was flattered by it, I felt like, through the movie. But he was just like saying, I did it out of necessity. I was a short kid, and my brother just kept blocking every one of my set shots. And the film does an amazing job of showing the way the game was played before the jump shot kind of came in. And I mean,
Mind
we were
blowing, by the way.
huh?
Mind blowing the way it was played.
Oh, the four of us were looking at each other through the clips and literally like laughing out loud because it just looked so different than, the game obviously does now. And it's just like, holy shit. And then the one guy they're interviewing, the one dude, I can't remember who it is. He's not an NBA player, but he's like a basketball writer or something. And he was like, I watch these clips and I think, man, if I was born 60 years before the year I was born, there's no way I couldn't have made it in the NBA.
100%.
And we were all looking at each other like saying the same thing before that guy got on there and said it too. Like, shit, we would have dominated this league back in those days.
Jump shot. I would have introduced a killer
game.
crossover.
Yeah, no kidding. So I just wanted to chime in on that. Like, that old footage was so great. And just kind of seeing where it was at and where it's gotten to, in a relatively short amount of time, really, when you're thinking about it. So, but then Kenny goes on to college. They're all state at Wyoming, right? Him and his buddies. And then I think they said, was it the whole all-state team from Wyoming went to Wyoming, or like 4 of the 5 guys that were all-state
like
high
that.
school?
Yeah.
Something, which is really cool. Like, that's the dream. I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to be really good, make an Indiana All-Star team, and then just get with all the dudes and go to a school and be really good and do it homegrown, home team type talent. And they did it. I mean, and that was really cool, and I'm super jealous of Kenny for being able to do that.
Yeah, well, they were like the Fab Five coming in too, because as freshmen they ended up beating the varsity team with him sort of leading the way. So just kind of ushering in their own era of Wyoming basketball. And Wyoming, not exactly a hotbed for college basketball throughout the history, but certainly during this time they set a different tone there.
I thought, speaking of the filmmakers and giving them a little love on this side of things too, was they did a great job with finding clips of Wyoming, of those games, of Kenny specifically in those things. And they showed a few things on loop because there's just not that much stuff that's out there. But they were flashing press clippings. And I think there was a poster in there advertising, or maybe a newspaper that was kind of advertising the varsity playing the freshmen in Wyoming and stuff. Like, they really dug into the archives, which I can certainly appreciate when I'm doing the research for 99 and trying to come up with the same thing. So I was thoroughly impressed with the stuff that they were able to come to research and come up with and put into the film to help kind of tell that Wyoming story.
Well, Breivogel asked too. I think they did an awesome job with the illustrations too. So they used what I thought kind of looked like the Three Brothers illustrations from Harry Potter, where they're not like super complicated illustrations, but
Right.
they're very effective.
Yeah, that was cool. And then we got to talk to Jacob after the show, and Matt kind of got to elaborate on that with him, and that's when he was kind of telling us that there was only X amount of footage out there, and we had to kind of figure out a way. And I don't think Jacob was saying he was like super thrilled with doing it at first, but then he loved it once it was all kind of put together and laid out and stuff too. So it was really interesting hearing the behind the scenes on how that stuff kind of comes together in a film too.
Yeah, well, I think you can be nervous because illustration can turn out like the Looney Tunes if you don't do it right, and that's not the intention of this movie. There's some lightheartedness throughout the movie, but it definitely tells a real and serious story.
Right. So, and Jacob also, in that little time that we got to talk to him after the show, before they turned the lights off on us in the theater and basically forced us to leave, which was fine. But we could have went on for another 3 hours, I felt like.
Yeah.
But he was saying that they thought about going the reenactment route
Yeah.
and like bringing in actors, and like I was cringing inside as he was saying that, but he was also cringing at the thought of that. And because there's nothing worse in a basketball movie, an authentic basketball movie, to have inauthentic basketball scenes. It just kind of ruins it for me. And so when we talk about basketball movies, because you and I were going to do a whole pod on other basketball movies, or just take one basketball movie at a time and do a
Definitely.
separate pod on it, and because that would be a lot of fun. But you can't even rank on my list if you have actors portraying basketball players and they don't look like they play basketball. Like, it's just like the cardinal sin number one. Find some goddamn actors that can play basketball, or don't make a basketball movie.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of saying that too. Like, we didn't want it to come off super cheesy, and so they did a phenomenal job with that, and it came off flawless, I thought.
Oh yeah, but just think, you could have played Kenny Sailors.
Like, I'm like, Kenny was strong as shit. Like, I'm getting fat.
Yeah,
Not
you definitely
like
would have had to go on.
Struggling to see my collarbones these days. I mean, like I kept telling you during that movie, I'm like, look how strong that dude was, and you can basically see almost every inch of his body because of the uniforms back in those days, and we we laughed about that too. But those guys. Well, as you come to find out, Kenny's cut from a different cloth than any of the people or any of the four of us that were in the car driving up there to see a movie about
Definitely. So the second act of the movie then seems to be like the college time, and it leads up to this iconic photograph that was in Life magazine. So they couldn't find enough competition in Wyoming, so they move on outside of Wyoming, get on a train, start kind of barnstorming around the country, and eventually end up as the NCAA champions, but were still looked down on, and then played St. John's, I think, in kind of a combined championship, which obviously they don't do anymore, but NIT and NCAA championship, and they won that as well. And there's this photo of him just springing up off the ground, and it looks like the jump shot. Like, there is no question that if you showed it to any person who's played basketball for any amount of time anywhere on the planet right now, they would recognize that shot as the shot that most players use now to shoot the basketball.
Well, let's go back for a second to the NIT versus NCAA thing. So a lot of people, and maybe even people listening to us, I would like to think that our fan base is a pretty educated base, but for the younger folk out there, the NIT was seen as the premier tournament back in the day. So it's interesting as 99 researches some of these teams and brings some of this stuff to light, and we've done some NIT championship type stuff. It's looked down upon now, but at the time that was right up there. You went to either the NIT or the NCAA, and a lot of times the NIT champions were looked upon as the best team. And Marquette, like McGuire won with Marquette one year, and he took them into the NIT because he was pissed at the seeding that he got from the NCAA. And so it was never looked at as like a lesser tournament. That took years until that became the norm. So when you go into some of these arenas and you see NIT championship banners hanging, it's nothing to kind of like, sniff at. Those were highly competitive, and there were some great teams on there, and there were teams that won the NIT that would have won the NCAA tournament had they chose to go to the NCAA. So just a little background on that, and I'm not sure like when the years kind of switched on that, where everybody started going into the NCAA, but it probably wasn't until mid to late 70s, I would guess, probably that kind of started happening. So it's just kind of interesting to think, well, probably early to mid 70s, I would guess, something like that. So So when Wyoming wins, they're not really looked upon as anything special, right? And then so that promoter in New York set up the NCAA versus the NIT champions, which happened to both be in New York at that same time, to make money off of it, to put it in Madison Square Garden and just kind of have like a Clash of the Titans. And I think the movie says this is the only time that ever happened. So
Yeah.
like in the history of the NIT and the history of the NCAA, never had both teams met, after they both won the tournament to kind of have this battle royale, figure out who the best team was, except the year that Kenny Sailors in Wyoming won and St. John's won, and they got to play, and Wyoming won that too, which basically validated what they had done, right?
Yeah, and that St. John's team from the movie was stacked with guys who eventually were in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And being from New York City, like most of the guys on the St. John's team were obviously, I don't know if they would have looked down on the guys from Wyoming, but I can imagine that you see these guys from Wyoming who had never been to a big city, and you're imagining kind of a Hoosiers type scenario.
I can't imagine a group of New Yorkers thinking that they were better than a group of people from Wyoming, though. Is that what you're trying to say, Meyer? We got a lot of New York fans. We got a lot of New York customers out here.
How about that Syracuse gear?
Fan base.
Yeah, Syracuse, love them.
So Kenny does that, and then the Wyoming wins, and they're crowned the king or the champion of champions. And then what happens to Kenny next?
Yeah, well, it's 1943, so people might not know about the NCAA or NIT tournaments at that time, but they probably know what happened about that around that time, I hope, anyways. Kenny ends up getting drafted or enlists in World War II and serves as a Marine for 2 years. He is on a ship collecting injured soldiers and rises up to the level of captain from where he started. And they do a good job, I think, of portraying his leadership skills, things that he had already shown on the basketball court. One of the interesting things about basketball at this time that they noted in the movie is that the coaches didn't have the chance to really coach. They did all that before the game started, and then once the game started, they had to have a player on the court who was calling plays and kind of conducting things, so they didn't have that same level of control that they have today. And certainly he had already developed that and carried that over into his time as a soldier, and then ended up obviously surviving, getting out, went back then to play college basketball. They allowed him back. But his life had changed already at that time, and I think that even though he gets into some pro basketball, there were some things outside of his life that he started to prioritize that I think he would have said and did say in the movie became the defining part of his life.
Yeah, so let me go back to what you hit on there for just a second and kind of relate it to us and me as a parent. And this is about Kenny, but it's kind of about like how I kind of view youth sports and stuff. I think a lot of people want their kids to get into sports now because they want to live vicariously through them. And they want them to be the player that they weren't, whether that be at the middle school level, high school level, or making it into college or, the pros, which is a very, very slim chance of happening. But with me, and I'm a father, I've told the audience that several times now, but I'm a father of three, and two of them are boys. And obviously the Barnett family has a passion for basketball, but the big part to me is that they get involved in sports so that they get some of those leadership qualities, some of that teamwork stuff, because that is real life, and that's problem solving on the fly. It's camaraderie, is learning to work with one another, working to blend. And I thought that was really interesting in the Kenny Sailor story, is this leadership that this guy had and was just instilled in through the sporting world that he grew up, playing, and the sport he grew up playing transfers over into the Marines, and he just moves up. And they have Coach Knight is on there talking, and he said, well, let me tell you something. This dude was in the Marines for 2 years and moved up from where he started to a captain in 2 years. He said that tells you everything you need to know about Kenny Sailors. And I just think the sports are such a great tool or a great developer of character, leadership, learning how to problem solve, working with other people, and it can be transferred over into so many fields that, for me, and obviously you want your kids to do well, but for me, I just want them to be part of a group so they get that group culture, if that makes sense.
It does, just that human interaction and the camaraderie that comes along with that, and the opportunity to just express yourself in kind of a physical way. We're so kind of divorced from physical actions now. We sit behind computers so much that when you get a chance to do something like a sport, it really connects you with other people in a different way.
And then you see that kind of transfer into his, what you're going to call the third phase of his life, right? And the third stage of everything. And he's still this leader, just in a completely different field. And this is where the film took me for kind of a loop, where I was just like, wait, what in the hell is happening here?
There's two, I guess there's a little bit of like a coda to this, because he does end up playing in the NBA. For several years, his goal is to get his pension, and he does end up getting that. Plays in the NBA, successful, but it's the early NBA, so you're traveling around a lot. He's in big cities, and he finds out that his wife has some lung issues, and asks the doctor what he can do to prolong her life. And he says that you need to get out of the city, basically. And he goes about as far away as you can get.
Yeah, and this is like, so he goes to Alaska, and as they're showing the footage and scene, he becomes this like great hunter. And this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he like people pay him to take him out on hunts and stuff, right? Because they're hunting big game out there. And
he doesn't just go to Alaska like you or I would. Like, we'd show up in Anchorage and maybe get on a cruise and check out the mountains. Like, I think he says in the point that they don't really buy land in Alaska. He like just hikes into the wilderness, cuts down some trees, and claims some property for himself.
Yeah, we were laughing that you just like go out there, cut down a tree, make a sign that just says mine, and then just like staple it in.
That's what he did. Probably made the hat that he had on too. I think he had the same hat for like 35 years.
Yeah, the hat. He had a real sense of pride in that hat. But so the next part of the film is just footage of him leading people out into the wilderness, Alaskan wilderness, and coming back with like moose heads on horses and rams and bear and other thing. And he says like that was just great for him, and it matched up so he could, the hunting season and the school season matched up so he could be a teacher during the non-hunting months, and then be this hunting guide during the hunting months. But it wasn't enough for Kenny Sailors to be this renowned Alaskan hunting guide. He also had to be a state champion coach and coach every sport at this school.
The only school, I'm sure, in the area.
Yeah, that was way out there. And so he this is probably my favorite part, and Meyer and I have alluded to the fact that we're in education and we're educators and have been for too long now, it seems like. Can't believe it's been 17 years, but it's funny because of what he does in the girls program. Do you want to speak on what he did for the girls program there?
Well, it was, it seems like forever ago when you see the video footage, but then you see the numbers, and it's not that long ago, where people were thinking that girls couldn't play full court basketball. Like, it would be too strenuous for them. And at this time in Alaska, I don't even know if they allowed them to play basketball at all, or sports at all. So just it kind of goes with his notion of doing something different. Like he can't shoot over a tall guy who's going to jump in the air. They say that girls can't play basketball. Well, he's just going to tell them that they're going to play basketball and they'll do it.
Well, yeah. If there was any, when you guys see the film, if you are like us, you will absolutely just be blown away by the rules and the footage of the women's game around this time. So just to backtrack to that, it was 6-on-6, remember? So it was 3-on-3 in each half of the court because they didn't think that women could run full court because their bodies were too frail and wouldn't hold up, like Meyer just said. And so the footage of it, I didn't know that. Like, I did not know that. I never had read that, never had heard about it, never seen footage, none of that stuff. And I'm just like looking down the road at you guys like, is this shit real? Like, is this real life? Like, this really happened? And then, I mean, we're all kind of looking at each other, and then I start kind of putting everything together, and I tapped you, and I'm like, hey, how pissed would you be if you were one of the three girls stuck on the defensive side? And like, how the hell are you supposed to be a high volume shooter if you can't even cross half court into the offensive side of the thing? So it was interesting in the film. Again, in the guys that put together the film did a really good job on that backstory to then show you how Kenny kind of combated that and just changed it. And he just basically told his girls, like, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to play. First of all, they got the rules changed, so it was 5-on-5, and it was like the men's game where you ran the court and all that stuff. And then he just told them, like, we're going to play aggressive. We're not going to be intimidated. You guys can do this. And it was cool as hell that they had some of the girls that he had coached in the movie, and they were talking like, and every one of them to a T was just said how much he believed in them, how much he expected out of them, and how much they wanted to perform for him. And I think a few of them would tell you that they weren't, the most athletic people in the world, but they understood their jobs, they understood what they were supposed to do, and they turned that into state championships, multiple state championships. And that's really what it's all about, right?
Yeah, he just came off as a doer throughout the movie. Like, if it couldn't be done, he was going to do it. I can't imagine myself killing a moose, but I think if Kenny was leading the expedition, I'd figure it out somehow.
Exactly, but in the same sense, he was so laid back.
Oh, yeah. It's
so
just a 1 foot in front of the other type guy.
100%, and it was never. And you'll have to watch the movie to kind of understand, but that dude could have been the most macho of macho men if he wanted to be, and he never came across like that. He always was happy, and here's this guy that accomplished so much in so many different avenues of his life. And he basically just said, like, that was what my job was to do, and that's what I did. It was never like self-braggadocious, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You didn't pick any of that up at all during the film with him, did you?
No, but what they did that I really did enjoy is that the people that they were able to get in contact with did that for him, right? They've got Dirk Nowitzki, and they show him the picture of him jumping up in the air, and they've got Steph Curry, and they've got Kevin Durant, and they had Nancy Lieberman to talk about the girls' basketball. And I think those kind of segues, they're talking about what he did, but they're also, allowing for that ability to brag through someone else's eyes, because it is amazing. That's kind of. But
they would have never pulled that out of Kenny. It was pretty incredible. And then the last kind of phase of the movie really starts towards this Hall of Fame campaign.
Yeah, and they really seem to try to tie that in, and I thought for sure it was going to show that he makes it, and it's a little disappointing that he doesn't. But I guess for me, the ending was kind of the statue and just the legacy that he left with his kids. At least that's the way I had it in my mind, rather than whatever the NBA wants or doesn't want.
Yeah, he certainly didn't seem to be caught up in it. But and then he says somewhere in the film, but I'm also human, and it would be a great honor, obviously, to be inducted. But that's not who defines me or what defines me. I'm defined by being a husband, a father, a Marine, and a Christian. Basically, was his 4 points that he talks about in the movie, and I believe him thoroughly on that. And so he doesn't get in. They make that big push, and he doesn't get in. And they're still kind of on that path towards getting him into the Hall of Fame. And there's a lot of people pushing behind him. And some of those guys that you mentioned on the movie were on board with it. And Nancy Lieberman now is on the Hall of Fame committee. They were talking about Ty and Jacob were telling us about after the movie is over. So he's still up there. And I think the crazy stat to kind of put him in, to put it in perspective, they did that rundown of the players of the decade, the college players of the decade, and it was like Oscar Robertson for his decade, Lou Alcindor, and all these like who's who of I think Bill Russell was one of them. Yeah. These who's who of just titans in the game. And for the I think it was the 30s and 40s, it was Kenny Sailors. He was the guy. So you're talking about when they did it, I think there was five decades of it, and he was the one of the five or something. So I mean, that puts it in perspective how great this guy was. And you'd really have to see the film to understand, or look up the footage, if you can find footage on him, of the jump shot itself, because the jump shot itself is pure and it's modern. And they did another good job in the movie of showing some of the other people who are kind of credited with creating the jump shot, and we laughed at that stuff too, because some of those highlights were just absurd, and it was just kind of people just like throwing runners up and throwing half hooks, and one guy just like jumped and just threw a baseball missile at the goal.
Yeah, we're not talking about just jumping and shooting. We're talking about the shot that Steph Curry shoots. Like, it's no different.
So the thing that blew me away on his footage was just how modern his game was back in those days. And then he's in the film too as a 91 through 94-year-old, showing how he did his rocker step and the push pull with the ball, and would get the guys moving one way, and then kind of hit them with a crossover type move, push pull move, and then he would pull up and jump and shoot that jumper. And then he also said that once he started getting scouted on it, the defenses would slide under him. So he had to figure out how to stop on a dime, rise up, straight down, just textbook how we teach jump shooters nowadays to shoot the basketball. And there's no doubt in my mind he was the first guy to do it.
Yeah, watch Russell Westbrook when he plays, and you'll see the modern version of that. He stops on a dime, floats in the air, and hopefully hits it.
Yeah, was it Nowitzki that kept referring to Westbrook, how he just kind of flew around quicker than everybody and would just pull up, and it's funny because you think 30s and 40s basketball, and then somebody gets compared to Russell Westbrook, like you think that's like an insane leap. And I think that maybe that's the biggest compliment as to how much more modern Kenny Sailor's game looked compared to the rest of the footage that we watched. Like, it wasn't smoke and mirrors, and this movie wasn't created on just bullshit, like it was legit. And I'd love to get out to Wyoming and see that statue. I'm a big statue guy, though.
That thing looks incredible.
It really does.
I'd definitely rather have that than the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so it was just an incredible night. I was happy that you got to go and that I got to go, and So thankful for PRC, Ty Clark hooking us up, and then Jacob Hamilton taking some time to talk to us. And we told him we would put together a podcast, not because they gave us free tickets, but because we wanted to, and we wanted to kind of share the story, the Kenny Sailor story. And we'll do some more with it with the blog too. And then once it gets its wider release, we will push that out to you guys and show you where you can kind of pick that up and watch it, because it is definitely worth a watch.
Oh, for sure. I had a blast and would definitely recommend it. Do you want to spoil the Coach Knight quote from the movie, or are you gonna tease it and just leave it for them to see when they watch the movie?
No, they can see it. I think we gave away some of the movie as is. So Coach Knight obviously always gets the most laughs of everybody, but it was really neat trading stories with Ty and Jacob, because they both went down to Lubbock I think they were telling me about 4 years ago, as to where me and Aaron and Chad Amo got to go down there 2 years ago. So we were kind of talking about what we talked about, and some of the stories crossed over, and it was just it was a lot of fun sharing Coach Knight's stories. And we were in the heart of Indiana, and so when Coach Knight came on, there was just like electricity in the air, and people were just waiting to laugh and applaud him, and it was just cool to see that Coach Knight still pulls that.
He nails it.
Yep, he does. So good times had by all, and again, we appreciate everybody that set that up for us and made it happen.
Anything else you got before we get off the line?
No, I don't have anything else. We're gonna try to get Joe on maybe this next pod, right? Joe from the NBA, and we'll talk. We're gonna try to get Joe on from the NBA if our schedules can line up, and we're gonna highlight some guys that had great college careers that maybe didn't make it in the pros, and kind of discuss why we didn't think they made it in the pros, or just kind of how unbelievable it was that they didn't make it in the pros. So we're working on that. We're going to try to get Joe on there, and if we don't get Joe this time, we'll get him down the line, and we'll come on here and we'll talk about something else.
I love it. NBA starts tomorrow, so I'm going to work in some NBA talk.
Welcome back, basketball. We have missed you. So, all right, man. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you for listening to the 19.9 podcast with HVS, the High Volume Shooters. For more information, check out the blog at 19.9.com under HVS. And while you're there, do yourself a favor and pick up some retro college shorts. Till next time.